We've been watching what could be the most crucial 90 minutes of this U.S. presidential election, the U.S. president debate. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump versus Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee. They traded barbs on a range of issues: the economy, tariffs, taxes, abortion, border security. Harris was pressed on for her flip-flopping positions on issues, including fracking and police funding. Trump was asked about 2020 election denials and his role in deadly riot in Capitol Hill. They also touched on the Middle East, Ukraine wars, the role of the U.S. in global community. And so for more analysis on the debate that we just watched, we are joined by William Schneider, who's a professor emeritus at Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. So the 90-minute debate is now over. I just want to get your initial reaction on how it went down. Who controlled the debate better?
Well, I think Donald Trump came across as very, very angry. Now, I don't know if that's going to succeed with American voters, because his anger was right there up front. He attacked the Biden administration. He attacked Kamala Harris. He attacked her record. He attacked her plans. And that anger is felt by a lot of Americans. I don't know if it's a majority or enough to make him president, but he is clearly the president who tries to convey the anger that a lot of Americans feel.
And how do you think Professor Kamala Harris did? I mean, there was a lot of concern among Democrats, particularly that as the debate, wore on, dragged on, that she would crack under the pressure. Do you think she did okay? Did she stand up, and did she sufficiently address some of the shortcomings or the lack of knowledge as far as her positions are concerned?
I think she came across as tougher than most Americans expected. She is, of course, a woman, and toughness is not a quality that people associate with women, and particularly women candidates. Donald Trump has always had the advantage in every election of being seen as tougher than his opponent. He is a strong candidate, and that was very clear tonight. But she came across as able to fight with him, to reprimand him when she thought he got something wrong. She came across as much tougher than anyone probably expected, and I think that was to her benefit. On some issues, he was very good. He talked about the terrible the administration's policies on Afghanistan, bringing up the most vulnerable point in the entire Biden record. But she was very strong on the issue of abortion rights, which is a key issue in this election for a lot of voters.
Professor, speaking of Kamala Harris, I mean, the polls have been showing that a lot of voters say they want to know more about Kamala Harris, how she's going to lead the nation. Does she manage to add something to people's understanding of her ability to do the job?
She did talk about having some plans, which she didn't elaborate in very much detail. Trump made fun of her talking about plans all the time, but she talked as if she knew exactly what she wants to do, and she talked about especially the importance of unity, that we're all in this together, which was a way of reprimanding Trump for continuing the bitter division, almost a civil war, you might say, in the United States. She was a much more unifying candidate, but her plans were not always very clear. And I think that she didn't have the opportunity to really expand on them. She talked about a $6,000 tax credit for families with new children. She talked about giving a benefit to first-time home buyers. All of that is probably welcome news to a lot of Americans, but to a lot of Americans who are very angry over what's happened and over the Biden record, I'm sure they wanted more.
So, Professor, which leads me to this question. I mean, did she manage to, if you like, neutralize that underlying contradiction of a campaign, so far? I mean, she's running as an agent of change and as you mentioned, outlined some ideas. But she's also part of an unpopular administration in the sense that, that many Americans see higher prices, higher home prices, higher groceries and so forth, which they blame squarely on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Yes, that's the fundamental problem in this election, and the reason why it is, in fact, in every poll, a dead heat. It's because Americans are torn. They like Kamala Harris more than they like Donald Trump, but They don't like the record of the Biden administration, of which Kamala Harris is very much a part. She has to defend that record. And she tried to in several cases tonight in the debate. But it's a difficult record to defend because lots of it didn't work. Afghanistan was one of the weakest points of any presidency in recent history. And she had to defend that record. People associate her with Joe Biden because she is his vice president. She carries his record into this campaign. So for Americans who want change, they want to get some information about what changes she would make. They got a little bit of information when she talked about tax credits and benefits for people who are buying homes, but they're probably not going to be convinced without a lot more information about exactly what she intends to do if she becomes president to change things, because many voters, most voters, are very unhappy with the record of the Biden administration.
Professor, both candidates have been vying for undecided voters in this election. Do you think the voters will think of either of them differently as a result of this performance?
Well, they already thought Trump was strong and tough, and that was always his advantage. This debate has confirmed that and possibly pushing them over the edge to saying he's not just strong and tough, he's also pretty nasty and vicious. And that could be a problem. Did she convince people that she could do the job? I think she went some distance to doing that, but she was very defensive about a lot of points on the Biden record. And I'm not sure whatever she had to say will convince Americans that she's running on a strong record of the Biden administration. They're still going to want more information from her about exactly what she intends to do.
And Professor, I read so much that, debates don't decide elections, and more often voters remember things like who was in control, who, managed to, unnerve the other, and also for those one-liners, those zingers. Did you come across any which stood out?
Well, not a particularly brilliant one-liner. I have some notes here. I thought on abortion she made some very strong points, although she falsely accused Donald Trump of not being in supporter of IVF, which is in vitro fertilization. He has always been a supporter of that, and he reprimanded the Alabama state courts when they outlawed in vitro fertilization. He's on the defensive on that issue. I thought she did come across as tougher and stronger than anyone would have expected. And the important thing is she did not let Trump rattle her. She seemed to be rattling Trump more than he was rattling her. And that was a revelation, I think, for a lot of Americans.
So before we let you go, Professor, your verdict, who did better?
Well, I think Kamala Harris gave people a lot more ammunition to defend her, but I'm not sure that the job is anywhere near over. Trump does come across as stronger. And let me tell you something. The key point here was made by Bill Clinton 20 years ago. He said, talking about George Bush, in American politics, strong and wrong beats weak and right. Strong and wrong beats weak and right. That was Trump's advantage over Joe Biden. They saw him as strong, and they saw Joe Biden at his age as being very weak. That was why Joe Biden had to leave the race. I think that is still a difference between Trump and Harris, but she went some distance towards increasing her impression of being a strong candidate with this debate.
Fascinating point. Thank you, Professor. We do have to leave it there. William Schneider is Professor Emeritus at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University.